Sylvester Stallone stood quietly in the first-class line, dressed in worn jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and carrying a weathered duffel bag, the kind of man most people would overlook. But one arrogant passenger couldn't resist the chance to mock him. "Didn't know they let guys like you up here?" he sneered, loud enough for others to hear. What happened next didn't just silence the entire cabin, it shattered everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and what it really means to be a man. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow at 6 p.m., we've got another unforgettable story just for you. He thought he was sitting next to a nobody. Turns out he was sitting next to a legend who would quietly rewrite everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and what it means to be a man. He looked like someone who didn't belong there. That's what Mike Thompson thought when he first saw the older man in line for first class at LAX. Wrinkled flannel shirt, old leather boots, a scuffed duffel slung over one shoulder, no designer labels, no polished posture, and definitely no scent of expensive cologne. But there was something else, something in the man's eye, a silence, a weight, like he had seen things that couldn't be spoken. Mike, of course, didn't see any of that. He saw a seat that should have gone to someone who actually earned it. And that's where this story begins. In a crowded international terminal on a flight to Italy, with two men who couldn't have been more different, or more alike than they realized. It was a humid spring morning in Los Angeles. The terminals buzzed with a low murmur of rolling luggage, hurried footsteps, and TSA announcements echoing off the glass walls. Travelers hurried with espresso cups in one hand and passports in the other, boarding passes sticking out of coat pockets, and carry-ons swerving like carts in a... Mike Thompson was exactly where he deserved to be, the front of the first class. His suit was tailored perfectly to his broad frame, his wristwatch ticked with the precision of a Swiss banker, and his phone never left his palm, even when he wasn't looking at it. He wasn't flying to Italy for vain. No. This was about a business expansion, another notch in the empire and in his mind, everything about his clothing, even his smirk. That's when he noticed the older man in front of him. The man stood still, calm in the rush, as if the chaos around him existed in a separate world. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't adjusting his watch. He wasn't fidgeting or sighing. He just stood there, observing, listening, breathing. Mike squinted at the man, late 70s maybe. The guy's hands were calloused. His neck was thick, like someone who'd lifted heavy things most of his life. But he didn't look rich, didn't look sharp, didn't look successful. Mike leaned in just enough for the man to hear, then said with a half laugh, "Didn't know they let cowboys into first class these days." The older man turned, slowly, eyes gray-blue and sharp. Not offended, not even surprised, just still. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Guess it's a new world," he said. "Even cowboys need to fly sometimes." Mike raised his eyebrows. Was this guy serious? By the time the boarding group was called, Mike had already made up his mind. This guy's a fluke, a lottery winner. Or maybe someone's grandfather flying on their miles. He certainly didn't look like someone important. They boarded. Mike strutted down the jet bridge, greeting the flight attendant with a wink and stepping into the cabin with that practiced nod of approval, the kind of nod that says, "I belong here." And then he froze. Seated next to him, 2A, was the same man from the line. Cowboy boots kicked under the seat, duffel bag tucked beside, calm as ever. Mike shook his head and muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." The man turned to him and offered a hand. "Name's Sylvester." Mike blinked. He didn't shake the hand. Instead, he gave a polite but clipped nod and eased into his seat. "Well, Sylvester, guess we're neighbors." The plane took off with the smooth, confident grace of an international airliner used to flying powerful people to far-off places. But row 2A and 2B were having a different kind of turbulence, the silent kind. For the first hour, they didn't speak. Mike ordered champagne. Stallone, though Mike didn't know his last name yet, just asked for water. No ice, no lemon. Mike laughed to himself. "Gotta say," he eventually began, swirling his drink, "you're a hard man to read." Sylvester turned to him, expression unchanged. "I get that a lot." Mike nodded, taking it as an opening. "So what do you do, Sylvester? Retired?" "Sort of." "Military?" Sylvester shook his head. "Construction? Ranching?" Another soft, "No." "Well," Mike leaned in with a grin, "whatever it is, I admire your calm. Most people in first class are glued to their screens. You're just, what? Taking it in?" Sylvester looked out the window. "Not everyone comes up here for the same reasons." Mike tilted his head. "Ah, so you were upgraded. Got it." Sylvester didn't flinch, didn't correct him, didn't argue. He just smiled again, the kind of smile that made Mike feel smaller without understanding why. That unsettled him, so he pressed harder. "You know," Mike said, "it's interesting. Some folks work their whole lives to sit in this seat, and some folks just end up here by accident." Stallone replied without looking at him. "Maybe it's not about how you got here. Maybe it's about what you do with it." The line hit Mike harder than he expected, but instead of thinking, he deflected. "Sounds like something out of a fortune cookie," Stallone chuckled. "You'd be surprised where wisdom hides." As dinner was served, the air between them began to shift. Mike kept trying to pin the man down, with questions, with assumptions, with ego, but nothing stuck. And worse, other passengers were starting to listen. One woman across the aisle kept glancing toward them. The man in 3C had taken out his earbuds. Even a flight attendant paused longer than usual near their row. But Mike didn't notice. He was too focused on figuring out how this quiet old man had gotten under his skin without raising his voice. And then came the moment that would change everything. As the flight attendant cleared their trays, she leaned toward Stallone with a warm smile. "Mr. Stallone," she said, "the captain asked me to let you know everything's arranged for your arrival in Rome. He also asked me to say he's a huge fan." The name Stallone echoed in Mike's mind like a slap. He turned slowly, eyes wide, stomach flipping. "Sylvester Stallone?" he whispered. The older man nodded politely. Mike's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked down at his champagne, at his cufflinks, at the man beside him. And for the first time since they boarded, he had nothing left to say. The man he tried to belittle had lived 1,000 lives before Mike had ever built a single thing. And now, in seat 2A, face to face with the truth, Mike was about to confront the real price of arrogance. Mike didn't speak for a while, not out of politeness, but because something had cracked. He stared straight ahead as the seatbelt sign blinked off, but he wasn't seeing anything anymore. His mind was rewinding, replaying, recalculating. Sylvester Stallone, the man he'd just mocked, the man he thought was out of place. A name that carried decades of legacy, respect, and stories far deeper than any balance sheet Mike had ever stared at. But that wasn't what haunted him. What haunted him was how Stallone never brought it up, never threw it in his face, never tried to prove anything he didn't need to, and that made Mike feel hollow. "Listen," he said, clearing his throat. I had no idea who you were." Stallone turned to him slowly, expression calm. "And if I had told you," he said gently, "would you have treated me any differently?" Mike looked down. "I guess. Yeah, I would have," Sylvester nodded. "That's the problem." There was no venom in his voice, no need to humiliate, but those words hung in the air like a mirror Mike couldn't avoid. For the first time in a long time, Mike began to feel something he wasn't used to. Shame. He tried to hide it behind a laugh. "You know," he said, "you're not what I expected." Stallone raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect?" "I don't know. Flashy, loud, ego the size of the cabin." Sylvester "I already lived through that phase, left it behind with the VHS tapes," laughed awkwardly. It didn't make him. The flight continued in silence for a few more minutes. Then Mike, almost against his own instincts, asked, "Can I ask you something?" Stallone gave a small nod. "When you got famous, how did you stay grounded? Like, how did you not become a complete jerk? The question caught Stallone off guard, not because of the tone, but because of the honesty. He looked out the window again. The sky was streaked with soft clouds, golden with sunset. Then he spoke. I didn't. Mike blinked. I did become a jerk for a while. Sylvester folded his hands in his lap. There was a time I thought I had to be the loudest voice in every room, that I had to prove I was worth the success, that if I didn't walk in like a lion, they'd eat me alive. Then I lost things. People. Moments I'll never get back. Mike sat quiet, letting the words settle. So what changed? Stallone paused. I realized something. When you stop trying to prove you're somebody, that's when you really start becoming somebody. Mike leaned back, swallowing hard. He didn't know what was happening to him. This wasn't how he operated. But something about Stallone's stillness, his absence of ego, was disarming in the most painful way. It's weird, Mike admitted. I've built companies, I've made money. But sitting here, next to you, I feel like I haven't built anything that really matters. Stallone turned his gaze to him. That's the real success, he said. When you start asking those questions. Mike looked at his hands. There was a wedding ring on his finger, one that hadn't seen many sincere moments lately. My wife, he said. She tells me I've changed. Do you think she's right? Stallone asked. Mike nodded slowly. She used to say I had a softness in me, like I could really listen, really care. That I was still that kid from Cleveland who sold shoes in the summer and dreamed of being more. But now, he exhaled. Now I think she sees me and just sees numbers. Sylvester was quiet for a long moment. Then he said almost to himself, Fame does that too. Makes you forget the mirror used to show more than just the surface. Mike leaned in. Did you ever lose someone because of it? Stallone's jaw tightened just, yeah, a few. Silence again. I almost lost my daughter, he continued. Not physically, emotionally. She once told me I didn't know her favorite color, that I didn't ask how school was, that I talked more to cameras than to her. Mike felt an. I shut the cameras off, I sat down, and I listened. They both stared ahead now. Two men, different lives, but suddenly not so different. Mike broke the silence. I don't want to be the guy people tolerate just because he signs the checks. Stallone turned to him again. Then stop being him. Mike blinked. That simple? No, but it starts simple. One choice, one change. There was a pause. Then Mike chuckled, rubbing his face. You know what's crazy? I thought this flight was going to be about business in Italy, numbers, contracts, growth strategy. And now? Stallone asked. And now, I think it's about me, and what I'm afraid to admit I've become. Stallone smiled, not out of pride, but out of understanding. I told you, he said. Different people come to first class for different reasons. Mike isn't just some arrogant businessman. He's a man searching for something, connection, meaning peace, and he doesn't even realize it until this moment, with Stallone forces him to look inwards. The real twist isn't that Stallone is famous, it's that Mike is, and for the first time he knows it. But if you think this was the peak of Mike's transformation, you're wrong. Because what happened after they landed in Rome would test everything he had just learned and reveal a side of Stallone that no one, not even Mike, was prepared to see. The wheels touched down in Rome with a gentle thud, but something deeper had already shifted before the plane even landed. Mike stepped out of the aircraft not as the confident executive who had strutted through LAX, but as a man walking through fog, reflective, unsure, and maybe ready. Stallone, on the other hand, looked exactly as he had when he boarded, calm, grounded, present. They didn't speak much through immigration or baggage claim. There was a strange kind of silence between them, not awkward, but respectful, like Mike didn't want to disturb something that had begun to take root inside. Outside the terminal, a Blacktown car waited for Stallone. Mike, who had expected the actor to vanish into a sea of cameras and crowds, was stunned to see only a single driver holding a small sign that read, S. Stallone. No red carpet, no photographers, just Rome, and a man who didn't need applause to know who he was. Stallone turned to him. "You need a ride?" Mike hesitated. "I've got a car service, but—" He paused. "Honestly, I'd rather keep talking." Stallone gave a small nod and opened the door. As they drove through the streets of Rome, the city bloomed outside the windows, burnt orange rooftops, domed cathedrals, cobblestone alleys, the kind of place that felt eternal. Sylvester rolled down his window just slightly, letting the city's scent drift in. Espresso, old stone, olive oil, and spring. Mike stared out, his voice soft. "I've been to Rome before, but this time feels different." "It's not Rome that's different," Stallone replied. "It's you." They pulled up to a small stone villa on the edge of Trastevere, not a luxury hotel, but a quiet house tucked away behind flowering vines and a worn gate. "This is you?" Mike asked. "Yeah," Sylvester nodded. "Family roots." Mike blinked. "I thought you'd be at the Four Seasons or something." "I'm not here for comfort," Stallone said, stepping out. "I'm here to remember." Mike followed without being invited, like some unseen force was pulling him forward. Inside the villa, the air was thick with nostalgia. Old photos lined the walls. A smell of aged wood and lemon oil clung to the furniture. There were hand-painted tiles in the kitchen and a worn coat rack by the door. Sylvester moved through the space slowly, almost reverently. "This was my grandmother's house," he said. "Came here every few summers when I was a kid." Mike nodded, trying to absorb it all, like a museum. Stallone smiled. "Feels like home." They sat at a small table near a window overlooking the courtyard. Sylvester poured 2 small glasses of something dark and bitter. "Amaro," he explained. "Tastes like medicine, teaches you to appreciate the burn." Mike took a sip and coughed. Stallone chuckled softly. "Exactly." Then the conversation shifted. Mike asked questions, not the kind designed to impress, but the kind a man asks when he's finally ready to listen. "What's the thing you regret the most?" he asked quietly. Stallone looked at the glass in his hand. "Easy," he said. "Not slowing down sooner." Mike nodded. "And the thing you're proudest of?" Stallone took longer to answer. "My daughters. And the fact that I finally became the kind of man they could introduce to their friends without cringing." That made Mike laugh, a real laugh, the first in days. Then came the moment that broke the room open. Mike pulled out his phone, opened a photo, handed it to Stallone. A girl, maybe 10 years old. Freckles. Gap-toothed smile, holding a fishing rod. "She's mine," Mike said. "Emma." Stallone looked at the photo for a long time. "She looks like she still believes in you." Mike swallowed hard. "I don't think she should." And that's when the story lens shifted, from Stallone's fame to Mike's fatherhood, from ego to emptiness, from Rome to redemption. "Do you know what I was doing while she was catching that fish?" Mike asked. Stallone shook his head. "I was on a Zoom call, telling a factory in Detroit to cut 30 jobs. I told myself I'd be off in 5 minutes. It turned into an hour. By the time I got down to the lake, the sun was setting. She'd already thrown the fish back. I missed everything." Sylvester leaned forward. "Do you still have time to get it back?" Mike looked away. "I don't know." Stallone's voice was low, but steady. "Then that's your job now. Not profits, not meetings, not proving anything to anyone." He tapped the phone. "Her." Mike nodded slowly, like something ancient was finally crumbling. But then, as if fate needed to test his resolve, his phone lit up. Conference call. Urgent. He stared at the screen, then at Stallone, then back again. This would be the 3rd meeting, and what will she miss? He powered off the phone. The sound of it clicking black filled the room. Then came. Stallone stood and motioned toward a back hallway. "Come here. I want to show you something." Mike followed him down a narrow corridor where dust clung to the corners and light filtered through slatted windows. At the end, a single door. Inside, a room lined with boxes, old scripts, VHS tapes, photos, clippings from magazines yellowed by time, and on one small wooden shelf, a folded letter. Stallone picked it up, and handed it to Mike. "My mother wrote this," he said, "right before I made Rocky." Mike opened the envelope and read aloud. "Don't forget why you started, even when the world starts clapping, because applause fades, but who you are when no one's watching, that's what stays." Mike held the letter like made of glass. Stallone spoke softly. "Everyone's clapping for the wrong things these days, likes, status, flash, but none of that holds up when you're alone in a quiet room." Mike looked at him, eyes misty. "What if I've been chasing the wrong things for 20 years? Stallone gave him a steady look. "Then you stop chasing, and you start building." Mike didn't know it yet, but before the next sunrise, he'd get a chance to prove everything he'd just learned. Not in theory, but in the most unexpected and personal way possible. The morning came quietly. Birdsong filtered through the half-open shutters. The air in Rome was crisp, still carrying the breath of dawn. Inside the old villa, Mike sat alone at the same wooden table, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands. He had barely slept, not from anxiety, but from clarity. Somehow, in the stillness of the night, it had all become clear. His life, for all its structure, had been built on, and now he wanted rock. Stallone emerged from the hallway freshly showered, hair damp, t-shirt clean. "Sleep?" he asked. "But I think I woke up." Sylvester smiled softly. "That's something." They shared a quiet breakfast. Warm bread, black coffee, and no phones inside. Then, as they were finishing, Mike's phone buzzed again. Emma's school, missed call. His breath caught. He tapped it open. A voicemail. He hit play. "Hi, Dad. It's Emma. I know you're busy. I just wanted to tell you that today's the father-daughter reading thing at school. You probably forgot, and it's okay. Anyway, I just wanted to say I miss you. Bye." The silence after her voice ended was deafening. Mike stared at the screen, then at Stallone. "I have to go." Sylvester didn't ask, didn't try to stop him. "Then go." Mike stood. "But I don't even have a flight booked. I know a guy at the embassy," said, already reaching for his phone. "We'll get you on a plane by noon." Mike looked at him, overwhelmed. "Why are you helping me?" Stallone met his. "Because someone once helped me before I deserved." A few hours later, Mike was in a taxi en route to Fiumicino Airport. His heart raced, not with fear, but urgency. For the first time in years, he was racing toward something that mattered, not profit, not power. A 10-year-old girl with freckles and a fishing rod. 24 hours later, Cleveland, Ohio. Mike stepped into the brightly lit elementary school hallway, wearing jeans and a worn gray hoodie, not his usual uniform. Teachers passed by, smiling politely, not recognizing him as anything but another dad. Door slightly ajar, voices in. He peeked in. Children sat in a circle. Some parents read books aloud, and in the far corner, on a little carpet square, Emma sat alone. Her arms were around her knees. Her book lay unopened on her lap. Mike swallowed the lump in his. He stepped into the room slowly. Emma turned. Their eyes met. She blinked once. "Did Daddy?" Mike knelt beside her. "I'm sorry I'm late." Her voice was small. "You came?" He nodded. "I came." She launched into his arms. They sat together on the little square of carpet, her back against his chest, as he opened the book. It was a story about a mountain lion, brave, quiet, strong. Mike read every word, but his heart was somewhere else, replaying the letter, the silence between them. And then he heard Emma whisper, "You sound happy, Dad." He smiled. "I am. Do you?" 2 days later, Stallone stood alone on the balcony of the villa sipping espresso. He watched the breeze dance through the vines on the stone walls. He didn't need a response from Mike, didn't need thanks. He knew what had happened. He'd seen the change in the man's eyes. He set down the cup and walked into the hallway, past the family photos, past the old film scripts, and into the same back room, and wrote just 2 lines. He thought he was sitting next to a nobody. Turns out, he was sitting next to the mirror. He looked like someone who didn't belong there. But sometimes the ones who seem out of place are exactly where they're needed the most. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to, and we hope this story moved you as. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.